the retirement and the sudden money. And that's this whole question of identity.
Okay.
I think that's a huge other side to the financial nuts and bolts that sometimes is not talked about. It's kind of like a dark side of change and transition that I think is important to address.
Brandon Ducharme is an investment advisor representative of and offers investment advisory services through SCF Investment Advisors Incorporated, an SEC registered investment advisor, 10150 Meanly Drive, first floor, San Diego, California, 92131, 800-955-2517, www.scfsecurities.com. SCF Investment Advisors Incorporated and Ducharme Wealth Management are separate entities. The information in this podcast is current at the time of recording. It is based upon sources and data believed to be accurate and reliable. The information, opinions, and forward-looking statements expressed herein are subject to change without notice. Moreover, all comments and opinions voiced herein are for informational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations and should not be interpreted as such. Further, the opinions expressed are Brandon Ducharme's and his guests and do not reflect the views and opinions of SCF Investment Advisors or any of its affiliates. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what is appropriate for you, consult your financial professional. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax or legal advice. Ducharme Wealth Management and SCF Investment Advisors do not provide legal or tax advice. These services are provided by separate entities. The guest speakers featured in this podcast are not affiliated with SCF Investment Advisors, nor are they affiliated with Ducharme Wealth Management unless otherwise indicated.
What intrigued me is a couple years ago, you're at a conference with Ryan, and your specialty in your guys' business is the financial planning side of the house, if you will, right?
Right.
Obviously, Ryan's a little bit more, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ryan's a little bit more on the portfolio management side.
Oh, no, you're totally right. Not even like we have our own lanes. I'm the financial planning girl, and he's the investment guy.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
And I think that's a super cool dynamic that you guys have. But in talking at that conference, you have this additional designation, which is a chartered, give it to me here,
financial
transition specialist, right? Is that okay?
It's actually a certified financial transitionist. It's a CEFT.
Okay. Certified financial transitionist.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. So you have to, so it's an additional designation to the CFP or the certified financial planner. So, kind of unique. It's not something that, anyone can just go out and get.
Correct.
And, it shows some additional expertise in again, transition. Now financial transition is a big topic, right? Because what is that? The question is always like, what does that mean? Because transitioning from work to retirement is a transition. Transitioning from no kids to having a family, or from being single to being married. Or I think of another big one that people don't talk about enough is, if you're single as an adult, maybe you had a spouse that passed away or divorce and you're getting remarried, a little later in life. That's quite a big transition, right? If you start talking about,
absolutely, yes,
combining families or, finances kind of later in life with people, that's a huge transition. So there's all these big transitions that people go through, big career changes, right? What I want to have a more focused conversation on is the big transitions people go through when they come into what I would call sudden money, right? And that's primarily, I believe, an avenue of two things. So there are two things that I primarily see in my practice or in my community. And it's entrepreneurs that, they're kind of going through life and all of a sudden their business takes off for one reason or another. Like they have the Shark Tank moment or whatever. And, they were selling $10,000 a year of this product they were making at home in the kitchen. And now they're doing $5 million a year in sales and right. Or whatever. And they're just going, I'm focusing on my business. I'm making all this money. I don't really know what to do. My business is going great. And now everything else is a mess. And I feel like I've arrived, but I also feel so out of, you know what I mean? Like they're having a hard time putting the pieces together. I see that a reasonable amount. And then the other one is an inheritance, right?
Yep.
So, grandma and grandpa, pass away, or the parents pass away. And all of a sudden I have, a couple hundred or even, millions of dollars that I didn't have before. And I maybe they were intending, knew it was coming. And sometimes they didn't really realize that it was coming in a significant way like that. So I think those are the two most common ways that people come into like sudden money. Would you agree with that? Or is there another way that you see that's common that I haven't experienced or haven't dealt with yet?
No, I completely agree. Those are the two most common that we as financial planners and financial transitionists see. There is, of course, the outlier of winning the lottery, or sometimes
that's an
actually
inheritance. It's just from the government.
Right.
So I
The
guess,
founder of the Sudden Money Institute, Susan Bradley, big shout out to her, by the way, she's amazing. She founded the Sudden Money Institute, that is the organization that sponsors the financial transitionist designation.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so she actually works with athletes who come into a lot of money suddenly via a contract or something like that. So those are two other ways. I wouldn't say those are common, but they're two other things that we are aware of as financial transitionists. Any one of those, though, you nailed it. You're dealing with not just money and that side of the house, but you're also dealing with huge psychological and social change at a time when there's a lot going on. So what we're trained is in helping clients to navigate that as gracefully as possible. And there are specific tools that we use to address things that come up in those situations that I'm eager to talk with you about. It's a really interesting training because it focuses more on the psychological aspect of change and the impacts thereof.
Yeah. So let's run it through a scenario. So let's say I've come into the sudden money, whether I'm an entrepreneur, an athlete that just signed a contract. I hit that, even a college kid, maybe that has a great, NIL deal or something.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I now have money accumulating, whether it be, my business checking account, but it's a pass through. So it's really kind of my money, or it's just now it's in my checking account, or I have access to it in some way, whether it be beneficiary IRAs, trust accounts, whatever. I now sort of have access, and I'm going, what do I do with my life? I think one of the first questions I have is, I don't know what I don't know. And where do I turn to for help? And what's the most important things that I have to do right away? And so hopefully somebody finds, like one of us, right? Like a good fiduciary advisor.
Yes. Yes.
I think,
and not somebody who's knocking on the door as a salesperson, because they show up. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the baseline like advice that you have for somebody, if they haven't found you or I yet, right? It's like, what are the quick do's and don'ts of newfound wealth that you want to instill right away? I mean, and this is probably more behavioral principles, right? And do you have like a little list of like, here's the three do's and, a couple don'ts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, I always emphasize, don't rush.
Okay.
When you have a sudden change like this in your life, you might feel all of this pressure to make irrevocable decisions. And that could be the worst thing that you do. Doesn't matter what the decision is, but just making a hasty decision when you're dealing with big money like this is really sad to see. So the first thing that I think fiduciary advisors like you and I would advise is time out, take a breath. You don't have to do anything right now, sign anything right now. Let's look at a whole picture here. Let's slow it down a little bit. And that is the number one value I think that we would bring to clients.
Yeah. What about, telling people?
Yeah.
Right? I think that's always like,
that is huge. So that is something else that transitionists coach clients with a lot. We actually have a tool called Managing Expectations. And it's great because it's a two-parter. The first part is about managing your own expectations, which can be really eye-opening. Sometimes clients are thinking that they need to do or be someone else when they have a sudden money event. And part of our job is to question that. Do you really? What parts of your life have changed and what parts might not change? We are trained to ask the three transition questions, which are really helpful to anybody in this situation. And that is, what must I protect? That's number one. What must I let go of? That's number two. And then what must I celebrate or create, kind of moving forwards? Having clients think about those questions helps to bring up the psychological and the financial side and already get moving in the right direction, I think.
Yeah. When I did some additional training for a designation I have for helping high net worth clients, there's a whole segment in that program about coaching high net worth people through the behavioral side of, for lack of a better term, or like just keeping this simple, like don't tell people, right? Like people don't need to know what it is that you have, right? Like there's some people that need to know, right? You or I, we need to know what we're working with so we can help them. We have an obligation to help them in their best interest. You know, their buddy they went to high school with that's, you know, starting some new business and is seeking investment dollars because now they know you have it, not in your best interest. It might be a good idea. You know what I mean? It might be a good investment. But you can get additional outside help from the right people analyzing those opportunities. But if you tell people too much, right, then all of a sudden it's like people come out of the woodwork. They want to borrow money. They want to just get it deposited into their account. They want to get a check from you. They'll give you the IOUs. They'll give you the handshakes, you know, and there is a right and wrong way to borrow family members' money, to borrow friends' money, to borrow, you know, just people that you want to borrow money to as an investment, right? You want to sort of, you know, buy their debt, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
There's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And what you don't want is people emotionally tugging at you because they feel you just got this money and you didn't earn it. It's not your hard-earned money. And so they want to come help relieve you of the burden of carrying some of that money around for one reason or another, nefarious or not, right? But you know, there's a whole segment about like, consciously or subconsciously, for better or for worse, humans will, emotionally pull at other humans in an effort to try to get their money. So protect yourself by not sharing with everyone.
Yes.
And if you,
I think that's part of the advantage of working with an advisor is I'm sure you do it too. I feel like I'm always arming my client. Right.
Yeah.
I'm helping to give them the armor or the sword or whatever, and to just help go out and deal with life and other humans, as you said.
Yeah.
One of the best parts of this managing expectation tool, for example, is that you craft a personal statement that you can give, like at a cocktail party, when someone asks you about it, or someone maybe already knows that you come into some money and it, like you said, is pressuring you and pushing all the emotional buttons. You craft a personal statement that you can almost just feed back without all the emotional triggers. And it would be something like, I'm working with a financial transitionist or a financial planner, someone who is trained to help a widow like me. And we're figuring out all the pieces, and I'm not going to make any decisions yet. I'm going to survey everything and make sure I've considered everything before I make a decision, and just kind of let the person know, pause. I'm not going to do that right now. Doesn't mean never. You're not completely being rude, but you're helping with that emotional shield or buffer to try to make better decisions.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about really like calling it and building a specific process around like, okay, you've had this event. Let's build your, you know, your, what'd you call it? Like your mission statement,
personal statement.
Your personal statement.
Yeah.
But I do have, I have one client that came to mind, or someone that they do have a personal statement, and they just tell people, I'm reinvesting into my business right now. You know, so they're an entrepreneur and they say, I'm just reinvesting into my business right now. And they just kind of leave it at that. And Like, hey, I make, it's like, I don't know. It's just a direct enough statement, works for him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But vague enough that they
yeah,
don't need to know the detail, and just,
right. And yeah,
politely, let's talk about something else.
but that's a really interesting idea though, to like, write something down in advance, have something prepared, and say, XYZ reason, this is where I kind of stand. And just something that, when the emotions start flying and you're like, and you get the jitters and someone's putting you on the spot and all this, it's kind of that rehearsed, here's my line. I am working with a financial professional that's guiding me. You'd have to speak with them, or whatever reason, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, it's very empowering, and it even works with retirement as well. I had one client who, most of her colleagues were about 10 years older than she was.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were all retiring, and they were saying to her, why aren't you retiring? Why aren't you retiring? And it got really emotionally triggering for her.
Mm-hmm.
She hated that question. So we crafted a personal statement of just, she's not ready yet. She still enjoys working. She'll consider that. And when it's appropriate, she'll move forward, but it was something that it was like 3 sentences that she could just refer back to and not have to worry about coming up with something when she was emotionally triggered.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just having a little statement prepared, so you're more emotionally equipped, or you have an emotional fallback almost, right? When the emotions get high, cortisol's, pumping through and all the stress, and chest is tight and hands are shaking, and you're like, I have my statement.
I know my line.
Back off.
Yeah.
Okay. That's some great advice. That's such a great idea. That's a wonderful takeaway. Okay. So kind of taking this scenario, I have my money. I've sought some counsel from, trusted people around me that all said, find yourself a fiduciary advisor. And somebody told me, create a personal statement to tell people ahead of time. How do you start moving forward then? What's sort of the next thing to find the right people, to ask the right questions, mm-hmm. and to avoid doing the blatantly or obvious wrong things?
Yes. Yes. So we often do a brain dump, because that's when, someone comes to you that they've probably got a ton of things in their brain. Mm-hmm. They're not sure how to prioritize. They're maybe afraid something's left out. And it depends a lot on the personality and where the person's at when they come to you, right? So there's a wide range of things that we can see. But I often guide clients through, I don't call it a brain dump. We call it a decision-free zone, or DFZ. And we usually do it in thought clouds. So it's like you ask them what's on their mind and you jot that down. And what else, and what else? And you're kind of trained to just keep asking open-ended questions, because they may have come to you for a tax question about this inheritance that they had, for example. But then as it comes out, and then there's also this pension, and then there's this other thing. And then what do I do about my niece's student loan? I kind of want to pay that off, but is that a good idea? All this stuff. And so in the initial conversations with a professional, I always encourage people to just lay it all out there, right? Just dump out the drawer and let's have everything, because then that's when the mind is calm. When you can empty it all and just have it all out there. Yeah. You can calm down, and then we can prioritize. So this DFZ is a process of first a brain dump, then categorizing, because they're going to fall into groups. There'll be some things that are financial. There'll be some that are relationships. There will be some that are some other category. Health might come up. So you help to categorize what each area is, and then finally to prioritize. And a lot of things that feel urgent aren't really at the end of the day. So this activity really helps clients to think from a different perspective. Susan calls it taking them to the balcony. So you're down on the dance floor and everything's hot and sweaty and messy. So you take clients to the balcony where they can have a perspective on their own situation a little more objectively. And from there is where you can take a breath and make better decisions about how you want to move forward and what do you actually have to do now? What can you do soon? And what can you leave till later?
Yeah, that's, are you familiar with the, what kind of comes to mind is the prioritization matrix, right? The Stephen Covey principle. So
yeah.
So you have
it's like
things that are, so on one axis you have urgent and on the other axis you have important. So everything's kind of a combination of one of those with a positive or negative. So you have things that are important and urgent, and things that are, they're important, but they're not urgent. And then there's things that are, not important, but they are urgent. And then there's things that are not important and not urgent.
Totally. It's the same thing. It's a slightly less mathy way to do it, but the outcome is very similar. Yeah.
I have a pretty mathy brain. A gift or a curse depends on the day. But okay, I like that. So it categorizes stuff. How do you determine? So then what's the next step? So I've come in, I found you and I said, okay, fine. I'll trust you enough to brain dump all my concerns here and all the stuff in my brain. I have my personal statement. So I've protected myself from, all the, salesmen out there or all the family members or friends, all the people that want my money for somehow. Right. I protected myself from them. I'm here now. I trust you enough to, dump out the drawer and tell you all the stuff in my brain, because you have a fiduciary obligation, a legal fiduciary obligation as a financial advisor to, work in my best interest. So there's a baseline layer of trust, tell you all this stuff, but so now I've done that and we've figured out, okay, what are the financial things? What are the relationship things? And what are the health things? How do you then prioritize? Because maybe I have, let's say I have like 3 things in each of those categories, but, 2 of the relationship points might be, way more important to me than the bottom 2 points on the financial column. And it might be more important than one of the things in the health, or maybe one of the bullet points in health is more important than all of it. Like, how do you start to break that down and say, okay, we have them kind of categorized, but how do you determine the priority? Because I do believe that, financial planning is a behavioral thing, and it's not always about optimizing every single dollar. Sometimes it's about optimizing relationships, because money's a tool. So I, you know what I mean? I want to concede the point that, like, it's really easy if you come in and just say, here's all my stuff, run the math so I make the most efficient decisions ever. I'm a cold-hearted dude that doesn't care about anyone but myself, and I just want the best possible returns with the least amount of risk at all time and whatever, right? It's like, it's just not most people. They have these other things in these other categories, and how do you identify?
And I don't know about you, but I'll find that you could do something totally math-based like that and optimize everything from a financial perspective, and then they go off and
they do the opposite anyways, because they
beautiful plan. Well, and it's because you didn't address the psychological aspects of the relationship part, so that's why it's so important to get all of that stuff when we said dump the drawer, all the bits, because really, and I'm sure you get this in your behavioral studies as well, our financial decisions are powered by our emotions and relationships. So you really have to address those first to make the financial decisions stick.
Yeah.
It's all related.
One of my favorite things that Simon Sinek talks about, he's the guy that wrote the book, Start With Why.
I love him. Yeah.
Yeah. Great speaker. He talks about everyone makes emotional decisions. No one makes a logical decision. It's impossible for us as humans to make a logical decision. We all make emotional decisions. We just try to use logic to justify the emotional decisions we want to make.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly believe that, and I've seen people do goofy enough things time and time again, there is no other way to explain it other than they were doing what they wanted to do for whatever emotional driver was there, and they found ways to justify it. So there might be times where you can use some logic to put a roadblock in place for you or this or that, but you can't make logic. Like and you can hire somebody like an advisor to help advise you and add some logic and add context and help you see things from a different angle, or tell you that your justifications aren't, quite what you're hoping they are, and you got to come up with some additional things here. But how do you, if it's all emotional, how do you still put together a plan? Because we do have that flaw as a human that says, well, we can just justify anything. I mean, people can justify, seriously. I've seen people justify some crazy stuff.
Some, like you said, some loony, crazy stuff.
So how do you coach them? So how do you coach somebody around that? What's the key to help somebody see, hey, you're telling me you have this money now, but whatever, you're not you don't care about any of these columns, and you care all about these columns, but really it's really a mix of all these things that objectively you should be kind of caring about. And what I'm hearing you say is oftentimes is you do care about all those things, but there's that hang up, that friction point, that thing they have stuck in their head that like they have to do. Right. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's something really small, and it's like they have to do this thing, and it's paralyzing. They have to figure out they need to do this before they can do anything else.
Yes. Yes. It's funny. Internally, we'll call that the squid on their face.
Okay.
It actually came from Bill Backrack's training back in the day. And he would say, look, if a client comes to you and they have a squid on their face, they are not going to hear anything you have to say, no matter how brilliant it is, until you get the squid off their face.
Yeah.
And so that's our internal speak at Shatteredge, is we say, okay, what's the squid on their face? What do we have to address before we can move forward? So yeah, I completely hear what you're saying there.
Yeah. So how do you help them remove it? That's the...
Yeah. With financial transitions, we actually address that as narrowed or fractured focus is the trait that we call there. And there are a couple of different things that we can do. Actually just doing that DFZ, that brain dump, and then categorizing and prioritizing often helps to kind of calm that down. But let's say that they still just have this one point that they focus on. You can try to play a what if scenario with that. Okay, let's address this. What if you did this action that you're so focused on? Let's think through what could happen and the possible repercussions from that, and let them run wild, right? And pursue that thought to the end, and try to point out other perspectives. Maybe this might be an outcome. Maybe this might be an outcome, and so forth. And constantly go back to that brain dump, which is why it's useful to have it on a piece of paper to point out, great, this little piece also affects this little piece, which affects this little piece. And mostly just trying to expand the horizon. Again, that taking up to the balcony to try to honor and address the thing that they're so focused on, and make it an and, not an or statement, and point out the other repercussions that might have.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you might end up just acting on that one piece because they just have to do it before anything is done. Maybe you scale it down if it's some big decision, but you kind of have to let the client lead and provide guidance from the side. You are the Yoda in this case. You are not the Luke Skywalker of the story.
Well, I think so many people forget that the client is in the driver's seat, and as great of as an advisor as you think you are, or you have the best financial product, or you have the best investment portfolio, or you have the best private, investment opportunity, or whatever, or you think you're the best ever behavioral coach that, I know when the volatility comes, I can coach my clients through this to not sell out or whatever, right? The client is in the driver's seat, and we can be good. We can't be perfect. And clients can't be perfect. And, it goes back to the old adage, everyone's a high risk investor when the market's going up, and everyone's a risk adverse investor when the market's going down. Right. So I don't think it's any different when we're coaching people behaviorally from the planning side. And I think this applies to, someone going through large transitions. Is you can't go through and say, hey, you've received all this money, so just put it aside and invest it and pretend like life hasn't changed, or don't do anything different.
That wouldn't be good guidance.
Yeah, no. you'll be okay. Just keep hey, just keep doing all the rest of the stuff we talked about and planned on and whatever. And it's like, hey, they are internally going to have these things. I need to help so-and-so. I need to pay this off. I need to buy that Porsche I've always wanted. I need to do whatever. Right. And so you have to be able to coach people through to a place where they feel that it's an acceptable position, right? Like you have to guide their logic to help them make that emotional decision.
Mhm.
Is almost
Yeah.
kind of what
Yeah.
I'm hearing is the most appropriate. And I'm trying to like think through all the conversations I've had with clients through all, like there's so many, and there's opportunities that in hindsight, I'm like, hey man, I could have done so much better to help somebody. Right. But
well, like you said, we're not perfect. Clients aren't perfect.
Oh yeah.
We all learn and grow together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you always get better. Well, you should always get better.
Yeah.
But
something you said actually made me think of, I will sometimes go back to a great budgeting exercise by the gentleman who wrote I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I will butcher his name. I think it's Ramit Sethi.
Oh yeah. I don't know how to pronounce it. I know who you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah. I don't either. But I do really like the spending plan that he has, which allows for a bucket, a portion to be guilt-free spending money. It's like, enjoy it and go crazy money.
Yep.
And when he's talking about budgeting, it's like a 5 or 10% bucket, that you put away to be able to do that. But when we're talking about sudden money, I think it's important to consider that as well, that you look at that whole financial plan, that whole picture, but some little portion, I find it's helpful to say, yeah, you know what, go out and buy that thing, or do maybe it's not enough for a car, but you know what I'm saying? A little portion has to be some, get it out of your system, go have fun, work through those emotionals. That kind of bucket, I think, is actually quite sensible because it's going to show up. So if you try to be too strict about it, that's not helpful. You have to have some flexibility to allow for that moment of euphoria, or if it's an inheritance, maybe that moment of grief. There are lots of different things you can see on the spectrum here, but almost to have an emotional bucket to make that okay. Yeah. But contained.
Planned. It's I don't know, planned chaos, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Do whatever, just keep it within the bounds. I always think, and there's going to be exceptions to this, right? But if you got sudden money, most of the time it's going to be because either your efforts paid off, right? So if you're
like a business,
if you're the entrepreneur, and you've been grinding away and now your business is blowing up, you don't have to be so restricted that you don't enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? In any way. There is a sensible way to do it, like you're saying, or you take it in the sense that you receive an inheritance, right? And people will say, well, they never worked for that money. That's the silver spoon. Well, sure. But you know what? Somebody did. And they wanted you to have it. And they wanted you to have it because they wanted your life to be easier, more fun, better, more secure, whatever it might be. But they intentionally, and again, most of the time here, they intentionally wanted you to have that money for some reason. And that's money that they could have spent on themselves, but they rather you have it. Now in the event of untimely deaths, maybe that last part isn't totally applicable, right? But they certainly could have left. But they certainly could have left it to charity if they didn't want you to have it.
Because they had to name the beneficiary at some point, and they named you. Yeah. So I love that, Brandon. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. So in some way, enjoy it. Now, I've had situations where what made sense was not to spend a big lump sum,
right?
But to have a very conservative allocation in investments that says, this money will now produce, this kind of annual income. And now you can use that to take a vacation every single year. That's totally guilt-free and outside of your budget. You do with your family and this and that. And it's just kind of vacation money that just keeps, printing money for you, obviously, look, any investment, risk of loss, things can change.
Sure.
Whatever.
But you think about the rules that changed on inherited,
IRAs,
tax deferred accounts, right? Like IRAs and 401ks. And now we've got that 10-year rule. If we're not talking about a spouse, so we're talking about like kids or grandkids inheriting here. Well, they have to withdraw over 10 years anyway. So that's almost kind of a nice present for some cases, that they have to take a little portion and enjoy it or spend it or do something with it. That's just the tax law these days.
The math geek
so
in me
like
is
generates a good conversation.
the math geek in me is going like, this is not a gift at all. This was a horrible,
I know.
This is a horrible tax legislation for everyone that has a beneficiary IRA.
Most
advisors, like, this is so
yes,
bad.
but I found that it's an opportunity for clients who aren't so much in the math like we are.
Yeah,
for clients to think a little bit
feel
more creatively.
okay about. Yeah, I mean,
because you don't have to go out and spend it, but you do have to take it out of the account. And then what can you do?
Mm-hmm. Sure,
you could reinvest it. You don't have to spend it, or you could take a little portion and take a vacation, like you were saying. But it just kind of I find it gives clients almost a sense of control and choice.
Sure.
More so than just leaving it in the account like we used to be able to.
I find that the beneficiary IRA thing provides so much opportunity for high quality tax planning.
Yes.
That people don't realize is a factor at play when they just think, well, I'm just going to take the money out. And as I take the money out, I got to pay taxes. What are you going to plan around? And it's like, whoa, there's all this other stuff going on.
This is why you're talking to me.
Yeah. And there's so much strategy that can be employed on something that, so somebody has, this inheritance now and they think, well, this is just pretty simple. I have, $500,000 in this account. And as I got 10 years to take it out. And as I take it out, I'm going to pay taxes on it. What do I need what do I need an advisor for? And it's like, well, to craft the whole rest of the plan. What are you going to take it out for? What are you going to use it for? Why? And what can you do to use that money to help better your life, hopefully, right? Rather than just be a spendthrift, which is an ironic term. I learned from an attorney.
I know. That always used to confuse me.
That does not mean you're really thrifty and don't spend your money. It means the opposite. It means you're quite efficient at spending the money. Well, yeah, you're quite efficient at getting rid of it. Maybe is the better term. Anyways, but there's all these other pieces that you can put it together and just help somebody say. For me, the conversation is always, where are you right now? Where are you wanting to go? And then after I understand those two things, what are the resources we have to work with, and what are the future expectations?
Yeah.
Can we, and then there's all this opportunity, but if you just think like, well, I'll just take money out of the account, there's so much more at play. Like if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, I have a beneficiary IRA, I'm just going to take the money out and spend a little bit each year. And at the end of 10 years, there's going to be no money. Please, please, please get some quality help. You're leaving a ton of money on the table, and going back to what I had just said, somebody wanted you to have that money so that it could better your life. Yeah. No one, I promise, no one in the history of anyone has ever left somebody an IRA or a 401k in a tax-deferred place that they said, I want to leave this money to somebody so that they can give as much of it as possible to the government in taxes. No one has ever done that.
I've never seen the IRS named as a beneficiary on the beneficiary form. Have you, Brandon?
I have not. Although I have seen I've seen no shortage of like TikTok videos and social media things that play into these misconceptions about the tax planning side of stuff that say, basically if you do have a tax deferred account, you've named the IRS as a beneficiary. And that's so wildly untrue. They just don't understand tax planning.
Which is huge.
They take a very simple thing and they blow it up and make a catastrophic, mountain out of a little tiny molehill. Yeah. Anyways, that's so funny about the beneficiary. I'm going to remember that.
That whole opportunity of choice is huge when you have sudden money, right? We will do an exercise called anything, not everything.
Okay.
And you probably do something similar where you can list out all the different ideas of what you could do. Let's say that beneficiary IRA, like what can I do with all this money? And then scale back and say, okay, you're in a position where you could do anything with that, but you probably can't do everything on this list. So how can we structure it that it can be more tax efficient, that it also can be something that's a lasting gift from someone who loved you, that named you as the beneficiary? And build out that choice. But getting back to it's, the brain dump and that whole idea, you got to be able to address all these other things that are going on emotionally and just whirling in your head to move forward and make good decisions.
Anything, not everything. That is always such a interesting principle. Have you ever talked to somebody out like just out and about? They're like, oh, if only I had $1 million, and they think like that's the epitome of like, you could, have it all if you have $1 million, and you're going like, that's kind of what most people have when they go to retire. Right. And sometimes you even talk to people that have that, and that's their retirement account or whatever. And they say like, I have $1 million, and they're feeling pretty good. And you're going, yeah, you can do just about anything you probably want. You just can't do it all. And you can't do it all forever.
Right.
So you have some major flexibility. But you better pick and choose, because depending on how you choose to play this, you may be retired for 4 days and find yourself back at work.
Exactly. See, people who look at that $1 million, they're thinking about it in the bank and how much can I buy with $1 million?
Yep.
That's the wrong, I think that's the wrong perspective. That's going to lead you into trouble.
Yep.
Whether you're talking a retirement account or sudden money or anything, $1 million should be looked at as the base of an engine.
Mm-hmm.
How much can this engine create for me?
Yeah.
To like on a year-to-year basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of replacing a paycheck or providing an income, not as $1 million as a chunk, but as an engine that's got to generate.
I think this is one of the great ironies of why people have done well with real estate investing. I'm not endorsing, I'm not recommending that everyone just start real estate investing by any means. Oh my, there's a lot of risk. Now, calculated well, it can be a viable strategy. But I think the reason people do well with real estate investing is because you take all this money and you put it in the home, and you can't check the dang account balance. And so every real estate investor you basically ever talk to, they talk about one thing, the dang cash flow. That's what they care about. They say, I get this much in rent every month, or, after all my expenses this last year, I made this much. And they care about the tax advantages of it. They care about the cash flow of it, and also it's kind of like setting up a retirement plan for them all in one, in the sense that they're looking to have some tax advantages, and they want to turn this asset into income. And
I think you're totally onto something there, because it's just how it's viewed.
So it's a behavioral thing. It's not that real estate is like provided this, just whatever asset class that.
Right. It's really not a magical asset class, but because people understand it as an income producer
instead
as
of
opposed
an
to just
balance.
a chunk of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a psychological behavioral thing that's such a huge difference.
Yeah. So they just stick with it, and they don't look to see.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is when you look at people with a primary residence. Okay. So now it's not an investment that they just said, hey, I took my big bonus from work, or I took this inherited money or whatever. I had this chunk of money. I bought a rental property, and I'm just kind of letting it do its thing, and whatever. And I'm happy because I have tax advantages, and I'm happy because I have cash flow, and that's great. But when they go to their own personal residence, how often do you see it that they look at what their home is worth, and they say, gee, I only owe $100,000 on my home. It's worth $700,000. That's so much home equity sitting right there. I really could cash it out by a boat. Whatever. There's so many things that, and you're going from a financial planning standpoint, you're kind of scratching your head sometimes going, what's really nice when you're retired and don't have an income is not having to make a mortgage payment. But I digress. Yes. The point being, it behaviorally gets looked at differently.
Yeah.
When they go view it as like, well, it's not producing cash flow, right? Because everyone that has cash flow on an investment property, they can look at it every once in a while and say like, man, this has really gone up in value. But they know that if they, do that cash out refi, or they sell it, it turns the cash flow off. Mm-hmm. And that's what they cared about. Mm-hmm. They typically care about the income. So behaviorally, it's kind of worked for people in that sense. Mm-hmm. And it's not really particularly any different than owning, like, and I got to be really careful how I say this, equity, right? And rather than equity in a piece of real estate you own, it's equity in a company that pays a dividend, right? Mm-hmm. Now, not all real estate is created equal. Not all companies
Right.
are created equal.
Right.
I don't want to delve into,
Right.
how
We
you
realize there are
choose.
flaws in the metaphor,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
with
I'm
you.
just saying, like, I'm not, recommending one over the other or a certain, company over a certain type of real estate or
Right.
anything like that.
Right.
My
But
point
as a
being, though,
tool, it can be used in
it's
a
the same,
similar way.
it's the
Yeah.
same idea,
Yeah.
It's just that when you own shares in a company and they trade on the market, you get a daily valuation. Heck, you get an intraday valuation a lot of times that says, if you sell it all right now, here's how it plays out. And can you imagine, I've always had this theory when it comes to like real estate, that if you could, if you got a notification on your phone every time the valuation changed, or some algorithm could change the projected value of your home, people would like not own homes. Right. Like if there was like a Robin Hood version of your home values,
oh my
and
gosh,
it was just like,
so right.
your home's worth
Bad
$10,000
idea.
more today than it was yesterday. Oh, your home's worth $30,000 less than it was, last week. And it's, and you're constantly having to like look at it.
Yeah.
And you're going like, oh my gosh, and it drives those behavioral changes. But I've just noticed this weird thing.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there.
Anyways.
Absolutely.
So,
Because there's too much emphasis on the day-to-day changes of something like a stock or something that's more liquid of an asset than a home, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's too much information out there, and people get all excited about those day-to-day changes that really, just like the home, the day-to-day changes, it shouldn't matter so much. I like that metaphor that you got there.
Yeah. Have you found value with clients going through transitions to help them understand how to balance like illiquidity and liquidity, and how to structure their kind of income plan? Like, where do you spend money from? When,
Absolutely.
How does money flow through your accounts?
Yeah. We will do like Excel spreadsheets, or sometimes we have another tool that we use that will illustrate in one page, right? So not a whole huge financial plan book that no one ever reads, but just in one page, it will simplify, for example, the tax types that they have for the household. Is there some in Roth and tax-free? Is there some in tax-deferred? Is there some taxable, real estate? And kind of just put it like in a big pie so you can see visually the different types, and then talk about, like you said, drawing money. Where does it make the most sense from year to year? You have to take into account where their other income is coming from. We actually use a great piece of software that helps to plan and do what ifs from a tax standpoint that I really like to use. So tax planning is really, really important in sudden money or even just regular money.
Well, tax planning adds a ton of alpha, in my opinion, or has the opportunity to add it, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
It's like my grandpa always said, it's easier to keep money you already made than to try to make more money.
I love that.
I love that. Like, hey,
definitely
you already have it. You don't have to worry about making more. You just got to worry about keeping what you got sometimes,
That's right.
And,
that's right.
So paying unneeded dollars in taxes is just, man, if you can do some planning to work out some efficiencies on that. And I think one of my favorite parts about tax planning and leaning into that with clients is, and the ones that really get it, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. You can tell a client you want to do tax planning. You can't make them do the tax planning with you, and you can't make them implement the tax planning. But the clients that lean back in and we work together and we work with their accountant and we do a really good tax plan, what I find is you're enabling them to spend and enjoy more money than they would have, right? Yes. So like when you talk about sudden money, it's like, hey, so option A is we kind of don't pay attention to the efficiencies, and you give whatever, let's just call it 40%, to the government, or we do some good planning and you end up only giving maybe 20% or 30%, right? But there's this sliver or chunk of money somewhere in between that you get to just keep extra. That's just derived from an efficiency. Like we didn't have to take,
absolutely.
Now barring, super crazy, advanced tax strategies that I'm not going to dive into. Right. you're not taking like more risk to get it. You're not making like an investment
Right.
to make more money or
Yeah.
doing this. I'm just going to keep more of what I got. That's
I
it's
love
like
it.
the easiest money you'll make.
A client said it best to me once. We were looking at his accounts and he looked at his Roth IRA and he's like, Laura, that's my favorite bucket. And I said, why? And he said, because I can look at that bucket and that's mine.
Yeah, sure.
I don't have to think about all this other tax fancy stuff. I want everything in that bucket because it's mine. And I thought that's a pretty good understanding of that, actually.
I always try to help clients realize when I'm talking about tax buckets a little bit, right? You tend to, now this is different in different cases, and people that are going through transition, it's going to look a lot different depending on where your income's at right now and that beneficiary account and what other assets you are holding that might be selling off. And if there's assets that now have step up in basis versus, if they had a step up, but now it's been 6 months and now they've appreciated or depreciated further, right? Like this becomes complex.
Yes.
But when we're talking about the retirement side and why, you want to help, or I typically, at least one of my philosophies is try to maximize Roth dollars, especially if it's, if you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash flow a year, which even if somebody's not a high income earner, but they just had that beneficiary account land and now they are going to be in a high tax bracket.
That's right.
Whatever you can do to get Roth dollars, whether it's through a 401k at work or backdooring stuff, it can become advantageous. This isn't the same for everyone, right? I'm not recommending everyone try to get all their money to Roth, but what it becomes when you push that forward now to, okay, so you've gotten, this money or this inheritance or whatever, and we're going to push this through to your own retirement planning side. You can retire someday. The reason why Roth becomes powerful in the retirement plan is you can do all the tax planning with the traditional IRA and manage tax liabilities as effectively as possible. But where do you go to pull money from on the year when you just really want to take all the grandkids to Disney World? Or you finally have the itch, you can't scratch it anymore without going and buying that Corvette you always wanted, right? Or you have the huge medical expense come up that you had to have brain surgery and, Medicare is not covering it. And in all these scenarios, you need an extra $100,000 and you could pull it from traditional, but you pay a bunch of taxes that you didn't have to pay then. But if you pull it from the Roth on that top end, there's not that same tax consequences. So it gives you more flexibility from a tax planning standpoint long term. And, again, it's hard to put a lot of money away in Roth. And the more, this is also the great irony. Typically when people say, well, if you do one of these other advanced strategies and you can save more and now that is a lot of money, right? It's typically not relative to their income again. Does that make sense? So like if you look at like a mega backdoor Roth, right? Like you're familiar.
Okay.
So now you're talking about like, roughly speaking, you're talking about like a $60,000, mega backdoor Roth versus just like funding your $7,000 Roth allocation for the year. Right. Well, if you're the person that's putting away $60,000 a year on a strategy like this, right? It's probably actually pretty small again relative to your actual overall income and how much you are saving and ought to be saving. Yeah. To satisfy your likely retirement aspirations and lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas, the guy that's, he's only putting away $7,000, but it's still 10 to 15% of his income or whatever.
Right. That's significant.
But it's, I guess what I'm saying is it's still like just this small little bucket of what you should be doing most likely to plan for a quality retirement.
Right. So $7,000 a year is not going to get you to a quality retirement is what I'm hearing.
I am of the opinion that most people need to do something a little bit more than that.
Oh yeah. I agree with you on that one. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm also hearing you say, don't let that stop you from doing the $7,000 a year into Roth because that will give you flexibility and choice on down the road.
Yeah, like just because it's a little thing doesn't mean you just go like, oh, I'm just doing something else.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
It's like
you need a combination of both. Absolutely.
To me, it's like it's just an easy like pick me up. It's like a little add on. It's a little ad hoc. It's a little, you know what I mean? Just why not?
I have one client who loved to play the tax brackets when she and her husband retired, mm-hmm. and they had a certain lifestyle they wanted to maintain, but she would take out of the tax deferred, the 401k, just up to the tax bracket. And then she'd be like, okay, stop. I don't want to pay any more in taxes. We're going to take it out of other buckets, whether that be savings or Roth or some other things. But I loved how creative she got with that when she figured out that that was a game that you can play. And it all came from them saving in different ways through their working years, which was a cool thing.
Well, the cool thing is that if you're in major transition from sudden money, you oftentimes have these same scenarios that people deal with when they're retired. And now you're dealing with very similar things, and you might be in your 30s or 40s, right? Way before you're considering, all these retirement decisions. You haven't had time to think about all this. And that's where someone like you or myself can help out and kind of bridge that gap a little bit for them, right?
Absolutely. And there's one thing we haven't addressed here, Brandon, that I think is important with both of those, the retirement and the sudden money. And that's this whole question of identity.
Okay.
I think that's a huge other side to the financial nuts and bolts that sometimes is not talked about. It's kind of like a dark side of change and transition that I think is important to address. Do you see that too in your clients?
You're saying like letting them to kind of clarify. You're saying letting the money change them, basically, right? Like, hey, I have this money now, so now my identity needs to change with the money.
Oh, that's interesting. You said let the money change. I'm thinking it's going to change it, whether you wanted it to or not. It's going to change your life.
Interesting.
Susan Bradley's saying is when
life
not change your life, money changes, and when money changes, life changes.
Not let the money change your life, but change your personality. You know what I mean? How like having that money now manifest through different behaviors that you normally wouldn't have otherwise done, right? It's like the old meme, like, if I won the lottery, I'm not going to tell anyone, but there'd be signs, and it's always something funny. It's like, they're buying, like something name brand, it's a generic or whatever. And it's, but is that kind of what you're meaning? Like what is so I don't know. Help me understand a little bit more, Laura.
Yeah. So I'm talking, it's both internal and external.
Okay.
So the internal part is your identity is changing because now instead of thinking I am Laura who makes X amount per year as a teacher.
Sure.
Now I am Laura who inherited $1 million from my grandma. Right. So even just that own self-identity is, I'm a little different. And maybe you kind of say, okay, you take that in and it's not a big deal. But for many people, it is. And they kind of reshuffle maybe what's most important to them. Oh, now that I'm Laura, that's the millionaire, that means X, that I can go out and buy what I want or do a vacation or something like that. And how does that change your life view and how you relate to other people, even if you don't tell people about it? Yeah. Right. This is all an internal thing. How does it change you? And then there's the external thing of how do other people see you if they know about it and how they maybe treat you differently. So there's a lot of subtlety in identity and the expectations that go along with that is at play very often when we have these life-changing, money-changing events. Does that help to clarify?
Yeah, I think that like explaining it, there's the internal and the external, right? Which to me is you're going to have your own issues with, again, how you perceive yourself. And I think that's a really good call out. I was, like you said, I was Brandon, that was the school teacher, making it by, living my life and making, whatever dollar amount a year. And now I'm viewing myself as like, man, all right, well, now I'm a school teacher, but I got $1 million in the bank right now or whatever, and you're thinking, oh, well, now you have to tie that back to all the other internal belief systems you've always had. Like,
right.
I want to help people. I want to be a force of good around me. I want to help educate people. I want to see people be successful, right? Like you have all these things that teachers so commonly have, right? And feelings and beliefs. And those are all really good things. But as professionals, we know that if you just go out and start, helping every single person you see, you can do that for about a week, maybe on $1 million, right? And then you'll be done. You can't help because it goes back to anything, not everything. like you said. And
Yep.
so having a plan of, okay, well, the earlier conversation, what's important to you and what do you want to do and how do you fund that then?
Right.
This conversation. But then there's the external, which is, okay, I have this, I'm thinking about myself differently. And now it's starting to change my behaviorals and how I express myself. And that might be all of a sudden, if you're Brandon, the teacher, and if you show up to school next week in a Lamborghini or something, it's like
Right.
everyone's scratching their head. Like that's so out of
What's wrong
character.
with that? Yeah.
And so how do you, the question becomes, how do you coach somebody through or help them through that process so that they still realize, hey, you have all these assets now, but that's not, it's something you have. It's not who you are. And easy come, easy go. So if you don't do this kind of right, you'll be back where you were. And this gift that somebody has left you as an inheritance is going to be for naught because it won't be accomplishing the things that they likely wanted it to happen. Now, if somebody leaves you a bunch of money and they tell you, I'm leaving you this money, I want you to buy a Lamborghini. Dude, if that's what you feel good about, do it. I mean, like, right. Hey, if that's what you feel good about in your heart and soul, and that's what they wanted, but whatever. But again, we're speaking in generalities in most people, right? Or if you've been crushing it in your business and now it's just paying off, like, easy come, easy go. Businesses don't do great forever all the time. There's a lot of businesses that blow up and then they're gone.
Something that I find is really, really helpful. Can I share a graphic here?
Absolutely.
Because I think it's really pertinent to this discussion. And that's to normalize this whole process and help anyone to realize that this is a natural process, right? You're going to go through all this stuff. Okay. And so we use this here. This is the 4 stages of transition that, might look similar if you've looked at other stages of grief or stages of growth. It's about the process of being alive and being a human, but it's getting from, this is where we're talking about a sudden money event right here in the ending stage, right? Something has happened. Someone has passed, or the business has been sold, or recognizing some kind of ending that has happened that has changed your life.
Okay.
And then normalizing what often happens in that bubble right there. And then how you go through passage, because so many people just think that you have the ending, you have the big event, and then boop, you jump right over here to this new normal, this nice sunny orange dot, right? Mm-hmm. That it's like, hey, life changed, life's great, I'm done, ta-da.
Yeah.
Not the truth. That's not what we tend to do as humans. We have to go through this messy passage stage where stuff's gonna happen that we're going to deal with. There's this possibilities here, but there's fear and chaos. You can see this. It's a huge blob right here with all kinds of squiggles. It's that way on purpose. This takes several years to go through this. I like to liken it to, from a worm to a butterfly. You got to have this time in the chrysalis to figure out what you're going to end up as, both as financially and kind of psychologically or behavioral. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I like to use this graphic to normalize that process and to kind of figure out and give permission to step back and figure it out when you're in here. You got to have some grace with yourself and know that there's going to be some messy times ahead. It could lead to something beautiful, but it's a process.
Yeah, I can't imagine what happens on the inside of a cocoon when a caterpillar's in there, but I can only imagine it's disgusting. It's
yeah.
Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
For sure. So I like to show people to normalize it. And then we get back to what you were talking about at the beginning, Brandon, about there's the personal side, the technical side, the logical side, when you were saying about Simon Sinek, and how he talks about you use the personal side to, that's the real driver behind your financial decisions. And then we use the logical side to justify these. So recognizing that there are those two sides, and then recognizing that there can be times of struggle and there can be times when you flow through. Mm-hmm. I just find that really helpful with any clients dealing with this whole thing, to identify and normalize the process.
It's not good, bad, right or wrong.
Correct.
It just is. It just
It
is.
just is. It just
Yep.
is. And part of our job is to help people deal with that and get through it as gracefully as they can.
Yeah. Well, I think if people do what we've talked about, right? If you get that sudden money, slow down. Don't make rash decisions, right? Process it. Get trusted advice, right? Get advice from qualified advisors.
Yeah, who have seen it before, right? You haven't in your life, but they have.
Well, right. That's an interesting thing. I told someone once, it was like another advisor. They said, I just, sometimes there's this like imposter syndrome where like, I've never,
Totally.
like somebody told me, well, I just don't actually really get it because I've never retired. I'm like, dude, okay, well, if that's how you feel about it, but I feel like I've retired 100 times now.
Right, because I have with my clients.
It's like I kind of have, but
great perspective.
yeah, slow the process down. Get a trusted advisor. I love what you said about make a statement, a personal statement ahead of time that you're going to use, like arm yourself with that personal statement to tell people no in a polite but defined manner, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just tell people no, because you shouldn't have to rush into decisions. You shouldn't feel pressured about anything like this, and I would almost say add some advice here that if you feel pressured, you should take a step back. You shouldn't feel pressure.
Absolutely.
And don't tell people that don't need to know, right? It's your business. And then, don't wait. The other thing that I've kind of gotten out of this is don't wait till the chips have fallen, right? I've had people reach out to me and they say, oh, my parents died and we're getting this inheritance and all this stuff. So I'll call you next year like this. They said the estate will probably take a year to settle and then we'll call you then. And I'm going, please don't wait that long.
By then it's too late.
You've gone through, it's too easy to count chickens before they hatch. Right. Which manifests itself financially in, putting money on credit cards or home equity lines. Oftentimes, tax decisions can't be unwound. You can't plan for stuff. There's just, when you plan ahead of time, it provides so much more opportunity for efficiencies and for someone like, yourself, or me to the best of my abilities to coach somebody through from a little bit more of a behavioral side of the whole situation standpoint. Not because I'm a therapist or a psychologist, and I don't think that you're disillusioned to think that you are either. But
absolutely no. And sometimes I'll even tell people, if they're going through a lot, maybe you should seek a therapist or counselor. That can be a great member to the team when you have a sudden money event, in addition to a financial planner. Yeah.
We're just trying to put perspective to the situation because we've seen it before. We've been there. Yes. We help people through it. It's more regular for us. Whereas for you, it's just jarring, for the clients, it's this jarring life event. And so often it should be a good jarring life event. It should be a great, it should be the opportunity for a really exciting new chapter of their life. But the overwhelming nature of it can kind of detract from that joy. Yeah. So anyways.
But there are tools. You don't have to just feel like you're drowning in that situation and that's just the way it is. Reach out to professionals who can help you with that, and it could be a much more pleasant experience.
Wealth is not sink or swim. It's not. It's there's periods where you're going to be fatigued and you're going to feel like you're drowning, and good professionals around you can throw you that lifeline and help pull you back to safety a little bit, and you try it again, you go through it, you go through the motions, and sometimes you just got to stay in shallower waters, right? Until you've built up some stamina to venture into deeper waters, right?
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be, if you've had the sudden money, sometimes it feels like you just got tossed in the deep end. When in reality, it's okay for you to still act as if you're in the shallow end until you get it figured out and feel like you can move into deeper waters. You've been given the ability to move into deeper waters. It doesn't mean you have to be there and you have to be making complex decisions before you're ready or know what you're doing. So,
yeah.
Anyways,
Well said.
Love it. Love your perspective on all this. I've gotten some really good takeaways myself from this.
Awesome.
So appreciate your time and efforts.
No,
Laura,
thanks for having me on. This has been great.
Yeah. Hey, I am so aware of the fact that I am not the best fit for every single person out there, nor do I have the capacity to take on every single client or every single person that wants my help. If somebody feels like, they need your help, more specifically, what's the easiest way to find you, Laura?
Yeah. We have a website, and that's probably easiest because you can get contact information. You can email me. You can,
Cool.
Pop on my calendar to schedule a call. So our website is shadowridgeinvest.com.
Cool.
And that's where you can find me and Ryan and the whole team. And yeah, love to help everybody that we can.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I always enjoy hearing new perspectives and, continuing my education and what I can do to help clients. So thanks for.
Oh, Brandon, it sounds like you're doing
a little bit better
great.
today.
You're doing great with clients and really talking about and focusing on the right things. So anybody who comes to you is lucky to have you as an advisor.
Investing in real estate and securitized real estate may not be suitable for all investors and may involve special risks such as limited liquidity and demand for real property. Changes in supply and demand for real property, change in law, tenant turnover or defaults, loss of investment, competition, casualty losses, use of leverage. Real estate values may fluctuate based on economic, environmental, and other factors. There is no assurance that the investment objectives of any real estate program will be attained. Any hypothetical example contained in this document are for illustrative purposes only. They do not represent the past or future portfolio composition or performance of any specific investment and are not intended as investment advice. We suggest working with your financial professional to see which allocation opportunities may be right for you. The return and principal value of stock prices will fluctuate as market conditions change, and shares, when sold, may be worth more or less than the original cost. Asset allocation and diversification are approaches to help manage investment risk. Asset allocation and diversification do not guarantee against investment loss. Past performance does not guarantee future results. There are several varieties of individual retirement accounts, IRAs, including traditional and Roth IRAs. Tax-deferred accounts like IRAs have conditions that must be followed, otherwise penalties may be applied. Certain actions like rollovers or conversions to a Roth IRA may result in tax consequences. Before contributing, investing, or taking distributions, listeners are encouraged to consult their financial, tax, and/or legal professionals regarding their individual circumstances.